All right, welcome back. Week 11 and another Millionaire Makers on the horizon. This week, they went back to the $27 $93,000 format in terms of entrance. Last week, they tried out the $40 $53,000, and it was probably because of the FanDuel tournament going on. Anyway, back to this week. We're going to have more entrants, more teams, and you want to adjust your philosophy a bit. I don't play hundreds of lineups, and those that really have a shot at this tournament consistently, you'll see them over 100 lineups. They come up with a ton of variations, giving them a much better chance of hitting something. My philosophy is a little bit different. I'm not putting out 10K, 20K, 40K a week. Last week I had about 20 lineups, so it limits me in terms of the amount of variation, but I can still get a good variance of high risk and a little bit less risk just to make my money back. So I've been presenting over the weeks my lineups that I have high confidence in, but I really want you to place and have a really nice shot at winning, but I want you to make your money back. And this week I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. I'm going to give you one of my higher risk lineups that could potentially cash out a bit higher and could flop. So the major change in philosophy here is at the quarterback position, okay? Normally, I'll give you a Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers, a money in the bank player, as we call it on our site. This week, I'm going to go with someone like a Josh McCown or a Robert Griffin that may not be money in the bank, but open up a lot of salary for you and give you an opportunity to win. What we saw last week was the top three positions on DraftKings all had Mark Sanchez as a quarterback. The top position had a stack with Jordan Matthews. Jordan Matthews is the number 2 wide receiver on one of the best offenses in the league. And Mark Sanchez has been on with him in the practice squad for quite some time. And people went against the Carolina defense, which is always a safe bet. It was a great call, and it paid off tremendously. So we're going to go after that same philosophy this week. All right, I'm going to share my process with you. It's a little bit different than what we normally do, where I already have my lineup set. I'm going to talk you through kind of my philosophy here. So if you start at the quarterback position, we have the highest over-under possibly of the year at 58 with the Andrew Luck and Tom Brady game. And they're just super expensive, and they're certainly going to put up points. There are lots of options there. I'm certainly going to have some coverage. I like Brady. I really like a few quarterbacks this week. You've got a ton of opportunity here, and I love the salaries this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a high-scoring week. Last week we had the winner was at about 258. This week you're probably going to see in the 280s, 290s. So you're going to have to hit some high numbers across the position. Cam Newton, he hasn't been looking good, but anyone that goes up against Atlanta has a great shot at putting up points, and Atlanta has serious problems with running quarterbacks. Serious problems. So Newton can certainly bounce up this week, and he's not that bad of a price point. Fitting the criteria we spoke about in the beginning, I really like McCown, and I really like Robert Griffin this week, okay? So 2 terrible pass defenses. Josh goes against Washington, which is one of the worst, and Griffin goes against Tampa Bay, which could be the worst, and according to places like Pro Football Focus, is the worst. So you're going to have a lot of people on Matt Ryan. You're going to have a lot of people on some of these upper echelon quarterbacks. But the way that you can get ahead in this tournament and take a bit of a higher risk is going with one of these guys and stacking them with one of their cheaper receivers that is going to be under-owned. In this case, I'm going to go with McCown, and I'm going to stack him with Evans is certainly a viable option. Okay, he's been tearing it up. He's clearly the number 1. He's going to get his this week, but I'm going to go with Vincent Jackson. And the reason is he's quite a bit cheaper. Evans is about $6,800. Jackson is at $5,600. So he frees up $1,300, and Jackson has still been getting his targets. So if McCown is going to put up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, we know Washington is really tough against the run. So Tampa Bay is really hurting at the running back position. Rainey's not doing much. Sims is coming back. He fumbled last week. He's probably not there yet. I don't see them running the ball well at all. And I see those 3 touchdowns going in the air. Evans will probably grab 1, and I'm hoping Jackson grabs 1 or 2 and gets his 9, 10 targets that he's been getting. and puts up some yards and gets those touchdowns. So I don't see a huge variance here. Evans is certainly the better player. Jackson has lost a step. But with my stack here and going after a contrarian play to move ahead in the tournament, I feel good about the Jackson play. All right, so let's look at some running backs, okay? Foster looks like he's out. The beat writers are saying he's going to be out of the game, which means that it's going to open it up for Alfred Blue, okay? And Blue, he's probably going to be really heavily owned this week, but he's at a minimum salary of $3,000, and he certainly has a chance to pay off against Cleveland. I really like this play. Once again, you're probably looking at a 30% ownership, but get him into a few plays, and at $3,000, you're going to love the amount of cap space it opens up for you. So really early on, I like to look at the defensive position, and when you look at the salaries between a mid-range defense and a top range, you're looking at a difference of $400. So I always spend up when the salaries are in this range. Okay, I really like the Chargers this week. Last week, we picked up on the Cardinals, and we actually got the Eagles in a couple lineups, which really paid off, and it fits a similar mold. At home, you're a favorite. The other team's going to be throwing from behind, and you have an opportunity to run back some pick sixes or get a sack, fumble, pick up a TD. So Chargers have been down lately, haven't been playing that well. They're going to pick it up against Oakland at home, so I really like this play. I also really like the Broncos, and they're a couple thousand cheaper. They're going to pull ahead of Denver, and with St. Louis bringing back Hill, this is a really nice play. It pretty much depends on your number one wide receiver. And in this case, I'm going to go with Calvin Johnson over Demaryius Thomas. Now, both options are great. Demaryius didn't get his touchdown last week, and everyone else got on the board. So I expect him to get his 100 yards and a touchdown this week. But I also expect the same from Calvin Johnson, who's going up against an awful pass defense in Arizona. And while this is a pretty low over-under, Johnson is going to get his. Stafford's going to throw. Reggie Bush is out of the game. I don't see Arizona getting a lot on the ground. I would actually go after someone like Theo Riddick as opposed to Joique Bell. They both get a bump with Bush out, but this defense is the number one rush defense in the league, and that means they're going to have to throw. So in this case, I'm going to go with Calvin Johnson. And what that means is for my defensive selection, I'm not going to go with the Broncos. I'm not going to go with the Chargers. I'm going to go with the Broncos because I'm not playing against them with my Demaryius Thomas play. So while you can play against your own defense, it's not a good move because if your defense happens to get a touchdown in a game like this and pull way ahead of St. Louis, Demaryius could end up sitting. It is a concern. We saw that with Rodgers last week. If a team can't keep up with a high over-under and Denver's defense scores first, that could hurt Demaryius. And so that's why I'm using the Broncos with the Calvin Johnson matchup. If you decided to go with Demaryius Thomas, then I would go with Chargers or another option. And there are a number of options here. In this case, we're going to stick with that. All right, moving on to the next RB. Tons of options this week. Tons of value. Look, Forte's a beast. He's just so expensive. And as you saw last week, you can pay up and he can lay a dud. And so it's possible. I'm staying away from Foster, Forte. Lynch had a huge game. Everyone's going to be on him. I'm staying away from him. Bell is an interesting pick because he's been stinking it up but on the ground. But he always gets his PPR points. He gets receptions, and he's due going up against a poor Tennessee defense. So he's an interesting option, but I don't think you have to pay that high this week. Someone like Mark Ingram is a fantastic play. He's going to get 30 carries. He's going to get 25 to 30 carries. If Thomas and Kyrie Robinson are still out of this game, Ingram is a top number one RB, and you have to look at him at a really nice salary. Okay, but for the purpose of this lineup, a little bit higher risk, I'm going to keep taking you down. And here's a nice option, okay? Ryan Matthews is going to be not heavily owned. He's super cheap, going against Oakland. He's at home. They say he's going to get about 15 carries, but who knows, okay? He was supposedly healthy 2 weeks ago, 100%. And while Oliver's a great change of pace, Donald Brown's in the mix a bit, Ryan Matthews is the real deal when he's getting his touches. So if he does get his 15 touches, that might hamper his ability a bit, but he'd probably still get his. So in this position, I like Matthews, and I also like Hill. So New Orleans isn't a great rush defense. They give up a ton of touchdowns on the defensive end from the rushing position. In this case, I'm going to keep an eye on this, and you're going to have to do your research and decide who you like. In this case, I'm going to go with Hill. Bit of a shootout, so I'm hoping that they're going to run the ball and try and establish that run. Dalton hasn't been fantastic, and so I'm hoping they're going to lean on Hill a bit, and he could vulture some goal line touchdowns as well. All right, moving on to that final wide receiver position. I really like Antonio Brown, okay? He is a beast. He had a terrible game last week and still put up 8 receptions and let's see here, 74 yards, okay? He had 2 fumbles. He lost them both. And you know what that means. He's going to come back with a big game. We played that same card with Jordy Nelson. He had an off game. He came back. He put up a ton of points, and I'm seeing that again for Antonio Brown. This guy is the real deal, and he's worth it. At 7,800, he's a bit of a drop. He can easily put up Demaryius Thomas numbers, and he's the clear number 1 there. He's a plug and play for me this week. All right, tight end is a super interesting position this week. You've got 2 guys that are just a steal at 7,900 and 7,000. Gronkowski in the biggest game of the week, he's going to get his, and Graham is as well. Most people are going to go for Graham, I suspect, because he is 900 cheaper. And you've also got Julius Thomas, who just put up a big game. But we spoke about going against your defense and also tons of options on that team. So I'm going to go with Graham in this lineup. He's been unstoppable since he's been back. Cincinnati hasn't been a great defense. They're at home. He's going to get his. And while he's heavily owned, he's a good value. And you can't go wrong. Okay, with the final position, we've got a flex. We've got some options here, okay? With 4,100 left, you've got some options in the Atlanta game. You've got a couple running backs in Jonathan Stewart and Williams that are each going to get 14, 15 carries against Atlanta, which is the worst rush defense in the league. You can potentially stack both those running backs and have a shot. They're going to bring your value back to you. You're going to get maybe a touchdown out of each. I like Williams a little bit more in that lineup because Williams is the type of back that Atlanta has a lot of problems with. He's fast. He's shifty. He's getting the start. So if he has a hot hand, I can see him pulling off a screen pass for 50 yards and getting a touchdown against Atlanta. But with that said, I'm going with Pierre Garçon. Okay, Garçon has been having a bad run. He's been overshadowed by Deshaun Jackson. He hasn't been getting a lot of touches, but he's going against Tampa Bay this week, the worst pass defense in the league. He's going to bounce back. Griffin is back. Griffin was targeting him prior to leaving with his injury. So I really like Garçon in a bounce back game. I think he's going to be really low owned, and that's what you want in this GPP. And so here's this lineup that's a little bit riskier, but you've still got a great chance, okay? If McCown and Jackson hook up and you get those 25 points there, you've got starting running backs across the board in your running back position. They're going to get their touches, and that's what you want. You want your running back to get 20-plus touches, and we've got that with super low salaries, and anything can happen there. Okay, we've got Calvin Johnson. He's money in the bank. You know he's going against Arizona. Antonio Brown, once again, money in the bank. Jimmy Graham, money in the bank. And another guy that's going to fly under the radar that could put up 10 receptions, 100 yards, and a touchdown. The Broncos, we know they're going to be ahead. Going up against Sean Hill, there's going to be a lot of running on St. Louis. They can be a good rush team, but Broncos are good against the rush. They're going to let their corners go man-to-man. They're going to get up in that game. And then when they are heavily up in that game, they're going to put on the pass rush and hopefully pull off a couple late touchdowns like the Cardinals, like the Eagles. All right, well, that's it. Good luck once again. I hope that one of you is the millionaire this week. You can catch us at fantasyfootballmoneyleague.com, at FFmoneyleague on Twitter. Take care, guys.